Okay, I guess this is the old farts, and as usual, we screwed up the technology. Uh, so it's nice to know that no matter how things progress, nothing really changes. Tonight, I think we're going to be talking about Ukraine, mostly in terms of what should the United States be doing in in regard to the Ukraine. We know that the war is going on, and um, the Ukraine military seems to be making some progress in terms of regaining territory that was lost not only in the initial invasion by Russia last year, but back in 2014 when they declared that the Crimea Peninsula, belonged to Russia. Uh, and the real issue, I think, and hopefully the group agrees, is that the U.S. has to make a decision as to what makes sense for them. And I think that's really going to be a major topic, not only in the Republican primaries, but also in the election next year. So, as an introduction, hopefully that's sufficient. I'd like to have the group weigh in.
I think
Well,
go ahead, Steve. Go ahead.
I was just, I've been musing about uh, going towards negotiation, but hanging very tough, and wondering if that's a viable approach, so that with terms that are tough enough that the that that's that that's acceptable to Zelensky, but nevertheless starting to grease the wheels for negotiation and maybe crafting it so that we can embarrass Putin. No one's talking uh, about having negotiations. It seems to be totally off the table, and I would favor bringing it back on. I think there's some virtue there.
Well, my
I
understanding,
think,
I'm sorry, go
go
ahead.
ahead. I,
No,
I
go
think
ahead,
that
Paul.
any kind of negotiation is a defeat for Ukraine. And Russia invaded them. And if they come away and we negotiate some land that they can keep, then that's a they'll just start doing it to other people, other countries. Um, I think we have to stand firm. Um, the good thing about this present situation is there aren't any U.S. soldiers over there fighting with Ukraine. It's just money, and we can always print money. Print money to build, um, the different types of armaments that they need. Um, you know, so it's really it's really a win-win for us. Um, they're depleting Russians' uh, military at an alarming rate, and all we have to do is spend money. Spend money. We buy our the 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 different armaments that they need, send them over. So it's a win um, for the companies that make the armaments, and no American soldiers are over there. Now, I know that's a pretty uh, radical point of view, but
No, I don't.
it is my point of view.
Yeah. If I can jump in, I I don't think it's so radical. I tend to agree with you. My fear is um, that Russia is going to be able to rally some of the other republics that are in the area, and I'm not sure. There's so many possible questions with regard to the whole issue. Here in America, there are those who are very much opposed to our president getting any more involved. I'm not sure that he has the way he appears to be completely dedicated to the Ukraine. I don't know that is the best of all possible policies at this particular time. It's a work in progress, if if we can call it progress. I don't know. I would like to see. I think I would like to see what the Ukrainians themselves can continue to do, and I would advocate that America hang in there, not doing any more than they have already done, not expanding anymore, just hanging, so to speak, and letting them run the ball out, see how far they can get. Because if they are as good as they say, or as good as they certainly hope to be, they may well resolve the issue with the Russian leader. He seems to be treading water. He seems to, at least what we've heard is that he's having all kinds of difficulties. I don't know, but just imagine the Ukraine advancing even bit by bit, and the Russian leader just dropping out. I think there is some possible. It is a possibility, and if he does, I think that the thing that I find most amazing about the whole thing is that all of the Ukraine at one time belonged to to Russia, and they were allowed to go on their own. I think it was under Stalin. I'm not sure, that he gave them pretty much that piece of land, and I think they had all of it, including the peninsula in the southern part of the country. They have since lost that to Russia, and they seem to be surrounded a little bit. It's a big country. The Ukraine is a big country, and it's a very valuable country in terms of what it can produce. Wheat, in particular, is a big issue. I would tend to ride a little bit more and hope that they can show enough fortitude or continue to gain ground, so that maybe the Russian leader will just have to make a decision, either to concede. Maybe he'll leave his post. There has been talk about that recently. I'm sure you've all heard that he was vacant there for a little bit, and they were wondering whether it was permanent or not. One of the most interesting things that when I happened to see some notes on it, was that this whole country was a bit of a gift from Stalin to the people of what is now the Ukraine. He pretty much allowed them. My understanding is he pretty much allowed them to form their own country, and since then they have tended to be a little bit more independent. At first, they were part of the Russian country, and little by little, I guess they have been going out on their own. So I would say, yeah, hang in there and let's see what happens in, I don't know, the next 30, 60 days. If it's continued war and it gets, then yes, let's talk about an amnesty, or not an amnesty. Let's talk about settling our differences, even with new borders if necessary. but hang in there for a little bit more.
Well,
Anyway, that's
yeah.
my 2 cents.
Can I correct a little bit of what you were saying, Pat?
Sure.
Number one, Ukraine has been a country and a culture for 1,000 years. The Orthodox Catholic religion uh, that that Russia pretty much is totally affiliated with began in Kiev and went north. There's a language, etc. Two, yes, it was part of the Soviet Union, and whatever land was defined uh, by the Soviet Union as Ukraine.
Right.
It is what it is, but it became an independent country, which I think it was before the Soviet Union in 1991 when when the Soviet Union broke up, and the various units did basically referendums saying, "Do you want to be independent or part of the Russian affiliated states?" I can't remember. I think it's called. It doesn't really matter. Um, so there was a lot of stuff happening. But Paul, when you were talking about negotiations, I think you've got to include a couple of other factors, even if the land excuse me, if the land is not an issue. Russia has taken many, many, many thousands of children from Ukraine into Russia and is now raising them as Russian children. Two, what do you do with the country? The country is flattened. The industrial base is pretty much gone. The homes that people live in, pretty much gone. A lot of the transportation, pretty much gone. Who's going to pay for that? I
Uh,
think that's
the
part of the
the oligarchs,
negotiations. Huh?
the Russian oligarchs, the money we seize from the Russian oligarchs will go to rebuild Ukraine.
Okay, if
And
you can arrange that, I'm not sure you can, but it won't be enough. It's going to take.
Right, it won't be enough, but
Yes, start.
yeah, it'll be a start. The
Because, yeah,
the
okay.
the thing to worry about is if Ukraine is you know gets the upper hand. First of all, we told them that they can't go into Russia, and because that's a whole different scenario. So, but if Ukraine gets the upper hand and um, completely forces Russia out, then Russia will try to enlist the satellites, Belarus and whatever, there's a few of them around there, and that will escalate the war. So there's a you can't go and really destroy Russia. It has to maintain its integrity and its and its pride. As far as Kiev, I think that used to be, some long time ago, that used to be the capital of Russia. So I know was it the when the communists overthrew um, the I guess
The czar.
whoever was in charge there, when they overthrew him, um, they uh, they moved it to Moscow. But Kiev used to be a capital, at least a capital. I'm sorry, that's about it for me. Somebody else should come
Well,
in.
I was going to, I have a pessimistic view actually about the whole thing. although I understand we would you would like to start negotiations and all that. That's a well and good, but what I worry about is that Ukraine by itself, you can't. I don't think they're going to be able to win a war the way we think about it. And and given that they're not, there is a limited number of folks there. No matter how many arms we give them, it's still going to be a limited engagement, and Russia is going to keep on grinding them down. And how long will they be able to stay there unless international community, not just United States, international community steps in and does something to start the negotiation at some place? Yes, United States is playing a big role, but how much can the United States do for a long time? Because Russia is not a small place. Russia has a lot of backbone there about, a lot of stuff they can use in arms and folks there in comparison to Ukraine. But I would still argue that unless the international community does put in stiff negotiation terms and makes Putin pay, I don't think it's going to go anywhere. It's going to Putin is there and it's going to keep on going. And we are, and as Pat pointed out, a lot of folks in this country are opposed to our interaction there. So how long can we continue? So I have a pessimistic view about the whole thing.
Especially in view of the fact that we have a major election coming up in 2024, and we don't know precisely what a change in administration would bring as far as support for Ukraine. I did want to point out that that negotiations or mediation does not involve land only. We have a whole host of sanctions against the Soviet Union that could be used as bargaining chips and enable us to hang tough. So we don't necessarily have to concede land to do the Russians. We can offer a cessation of the sanctions. We could also possibly offer some sort of amnesty for Putin, taking him off the wanted list, so to speak.
One of the interesting things, as far as that's concerned, is that the West thought that putting these fairly significant sanctions on Russia would destroy the economy and force the government to make concessions because the people would require it. But it turns out that Russia is making more money now off their oil and their wheat than they were before the war. Oil, because even though they're selling at a steep discount to China and India, the amount of money they're getting per barrel of oil is more than they were getting before. And wheat is being used as not only a tool, but as a way of making money, because Africa relies on Russia and Ukraine, both wheat, and Russia has been destroying the Ukraine's wheat. And when they can't destroy it, they've been keeping it from being shipped out, at least by sea. So I think, personally, believe that that Russia will hang in at least until after November of next year.
What do you mean by hanging in?
They'll continue to fight. They'll continue to try to flatten the Ukraine cities, kill civilians, make it as expensive as possible for the Ukrainians to continue to fight. And if they get a more compliant president and or Congress, then they can negotiate. They can set the terms of the discussion. And it's not just the United States that's dealing with this. You've got Germany and England and various other countries that are trying to figure out how the hell they're going to, what they're going to do. Do you support Ukraine in the same way as the United States supported the Taliban in Afghanistan? As I think Paul was pointing out, to drain the economy and the will of Russia. It worked once. I don't know. It's not a simple issue, I don't think.
No, it's a very complicated issue,
Yeah.
and it appears to be becoming more complicated. But I don't quite see the Soviet Union at this point, unless what you're saying is that their economy. I mean, they've been rejected by so many people, so many countries in the West in so many different ways. Their money's tied up and whatnot. Now, if they are balancing their budgets based on the need for oil, then I think that's I think they must be doing a tremendous job. I tend to think that there's a crucial point that is about to come. It could be on either side. It could be Russia showing a major sense of I want to say weakness, not necessarily weakness, but where they can't quite make the decisions that they used to. If it is true, they have lost an enormous number of troops for various reasons. I think that is significant. I don't know where. I've also read just one article, but it was very meaningful in terms of the Russian people and their support for Putin, their support and their belief in the whole war. What it's all about and how they're being punished. And what I'm saying is that there are a lot of people, a lot of Russians who are questioning what their leader is doing. On the other side, they are making progress. It's minimal, I'm sure, but the ball seems to be rolling in the right direction for the Ukraine. I know that there's a lot of devastation in the Ukraine, and I suspect that with the help that they're getting, I think that's a key question. Are the allies, the so-called allies, the people of Europe in particular, are they going to continue to support? Okay, there are a lot of Americans who are questioning our president right now with regard to how much support he's willing to. There are many people who are begging or who are crying that he should relinquish, he should step back, not offer as much support. I've talked to a few people from that particular school of thought. So it does exist. There's a lot of pressure all around. There's pressure on Putin. There's pressure on the Ukrainian leader. There's pressure on the European Union. At what point can they no longer persevere? Which side has to give in, or has to at least show significant sign of backing down? If the United States says we're not sending you any more armaments, we've given you everything that we can, you're going to have to fight with what you have. That is significant. On the other hand, if the United States, up until our current president, we don't know about another president, what their views are, but this president, if he wants to continue, he insists on giving them as much aid as possible. It could be meaningful. My my overview, if you will, or the little bits that I've read and I've heard, and it has not been as extensive as I would like it to have been. But Russia is showing signs of weakness. Bob, you're saying that they're selling their oil and they're making up the difference of everything that they have lost in the, with dealing with the West. All of that they've lost, they've been able to make up with the sale of oil, and I don't know, possibly wheat or whatever. But I find that a little bit difficult to swallow. I'm not sure, And the other thing is that, depending on what you read and what you hear, not that we're selective in but each of us selects our own source. We tune in. Sometimes we tune in, or we have a habit of tuning in. Being human, we have a habit of tuning into the thing that we want to hear. And I may be guilty of that. Any of us may be guilty of that. And you make your generalities based on that. And so I don't know. I think it's still wide open. I think the Ukraine, yes, they've been hurt badly, but I think that they are, they certainly are showing a lot of spunk in terms of, at least from what I've seen, they get right back out there, and now they are, call it a small offensive. Nonetheless, it is an offensive. The stories about the number of Russian soldiers, Russian troops that have been lost, as well as aircraft and other pieces of armament, it's just, if it's true, it is close to incredible. I mean, I don't know how long, Russia can do that, can replace that equipment and replace that little sidebar with regard to that independent leader, the one who died in the crash. I can't think of his name. But I found that very, very interesting that, he has his own forces within Russia. It seems as though he was being put up with to some extent. It was very, very interesting. I don't recall seeing anything quite like, I know it's happened in Africa, where you have leaders of different forces and they're part of the, but I never heard of that in Russia. I thought Putin was exclusively the leader and the only one who could tell anyone where to go. But this guy, this Poroshenko or whatever his name is, one who died in the airplane, it was very interesting to find out that there was someone, even though he backed off, there was someone with a force who was, if I remember correctly, marching toward Moscow. Whatever that means, I don't know. But the fact that he exists or was allowed to exist, he didn't seem to be a compatriot of Putin. He was a force. He was just cast out onto the airwaves all of a sudden. I don't think many people knew of him or realized that he even existed. At any rate, it's still a big open game right now. I don't know where we go.
I just wanted to make 3 points actually, and then I will stop talking because I think Chuck.
No, don't stop.
I was going to make 3 points. Number one is I have talked to the Russian friends, and they say Russians like a strong leader. That's why Putin is in there. No matter what we say, Putin is in. We think he is weak. They don't think so. They think he is the godsend for Russia, and that's it. Number two is we have a big problem in the whole world. And as Bob pointed out, that Russia is selling oil, they are selling their wheat, and they have created a new exchange market for themselves to survive. And no matter what the West does with the sanctions, they are running with all the things what they want. And that way, no matter what the West does, I think Russia is going to keep grinding down the Ukrainians. And unfortunately, as Bob pointed out, Ukraine is being flattened to the core. And at the same time, there's a lot of refugee problem right now. Refugees are running away to all the adjoining countries. So that in itself tells you no matter how much we supply to the Ukrainians, how far can they succeed? That's why I continue being pessimistic, given that the rest of the world does not talk with the same united voice against Putin. That throws cold water on the whole process of getting Putin to a place where you can address him.
I was going
As
to.
far as the plane going down, there's a strong indication it was shot down as an assassination.
Right.
That's Putin's strategy.
Right, and
Yeah.
that was expected from the time the from the time Bajorian started saying nasty things about the war in Ukraine. It was a question of time before he died. Chuck, you haven't said a word.
Well, I've enjoyed listening to everybody talking here, and so I figured that was fine. A couple of things I did want to mention is that my understanding is that Kyiv was never the capital of Russia. It was the capital of Ukraine. Soviet Union made Kyiv the capital in 1934. But the couple of things. One is that we need to not forget that Russia and China are allies in so many ways. And at the same time, Russia has, I think, the largest supply of nuclear weapons. And I can envision with Putin, if he feels he's done, he's going to die. He may want to go down in a blaze of glory. The other thing is the aspect that are we officially continuing to be the world's policeman? We're quite a ways away from this situation, and we have all these countries that are in Europe that are doing certain degrees. Although I understand a couple of days ago that Poland says they're not going to do anything else in supplying Ukraine, and I know Paul said something early on about to just continue to give them money and print money. At the same time, we're about $33 trillion in debt, and that's going to continue to climb. And as that continues to climb, the inflation rate in this country continues to get higher and higher. So there's a I would gather that if Putin really feels threatened, he'll lean a little bit more on China. And North Korea is supplying them, is building weapons for Russia. I did read earlier today that the Ukraine with the Wagner group, that this fellow that was supposedly killed in that plane crash has now rejoined the Russian troops, and they're back in the fight. I read that today in the Wall Street Journal, so there's a lot of issues here. And the other thing I wanted to mention was that I forget what it was now. It'll come back to me.
Are you saying
the other thing I wanted to mention is that one of the big issues that I think my understanding is that pushed Russia to go after Ukraine was the uncertainty that the UN or the EU was going to allow them to join. Yes. And Russia did not want Ukraine to be joining. And if they had been given more assurance that they would not be allowed to join, may not have sparked this.
You probably mean NATO, don't you?
Yeah, well, maybe the EU as well.
I think
Ukraine wanted to join both.
That was actually the argument. Posner, the Brooklyn-born Soviet Russian journalist, he gave a seminar on this a few years ago, and that's what he said. West created the Ukraine problem by making sure we keep needling Russia and getting NATO closer and closer and saying we will get the Ukraine into NATO. And that's what Putin probably did not like.
We talk about Putin as being the person very much in charge and determining the policy of the Soviets. What worries me is that, in my mind anyway, that we identify the Ukraine with Zelensky. And so you can ask the hypothetical question, would the effort that the Ukrainians are making, would it be the same without Zelensky? And my own answer to myself is absolutely not, that he is the one who inspires them internally. He's the one who travels to foreign countries and gathers in tanks and planes and defense systems. So this whole effort is vulnerable to the existence of Zelensky. If anything happened to him, I think their effort would collapse. I think we have to look at that possibility too. I'm sure the Russians would love to assassinate Zelensky, and they seem to be very successful in planting nerve gases in strange places. So I think that whole effort depends upon the health and welfare of Zelensky, and I think that's a big vulnerability we need to account for when we are considering negotiations or future aid. So it's not just whether Biden stays in office, it's not entirely whether Putin stays or goes. It depends to a large extent on Zelensky.
I'm sure the Russians have done a similar analysis to what you said. And the question is, why is Zelensky still walking around? Keep in mind, he's telling you he's going to be in Washington on such and such a date at such and such a time, which means they know when he's leaving. They know when he's coming back. If they really wanted to get him, damn the cost, he'd be a dead man.
That's what I'm worried about. Yeah.
Well, I'm wondering why they haven't up till now. That may give an indication of the likelihood that they will go after him at some point in the future.
Maybe he's got 10 body doubles.
Yeah, well, go ahead.
I was going to say sarcastically, maybe he's got 10 body doubles.
That's a possibility. But remember that Putin is a hardened KGB guy, and he knows how to operate. We don't know what is going on in his head.
True. Well, let's get back to what we started the discussion about is, what do we think we, the United States, should do? What do we want our leaders to do today, and also in 13 or 14 months?
Well, we got to keep in mind also, I just want to mention that Ukraine also is one of the worst one of the biggest corrupted countries in the world financially. And many people don't know what's really going on with a lot of the money that we've sent them. There's been very little accountability, and whether or not some of the hierarchies in Ukraine are just pocketing some or much of the money.
But keep in mind, much of what we're sending them is not cash. We're sending them tanks. We're sending them airplanes. We're sending them bullets, not cash to go and buy it.
We are sending them cash.
Some cash for humanitarian aid, but that's a small percentage of what we're sending. So to say I haven't seen the money in Ukraine, in most cases, And by the way, Ukraine's not the only one. When we give military aid, we're almost always giving hardware, not cash. Cash is being spent in the United States to produce the hardware. So it's not money being thrown out the window. Uh, it's other stuff.
I'll have to check that, Bob, because I question what I guess the question is, what do you consider very little cash, and what is actually the number is?
Well,
You may
I
be
can tell
right.
you,
I don't know.
if we sell them food, it's not food that they could go down to the grocery store and buy, because Ukraine's agriculture is in deep trouble. We're sending them boxes of rice, boxes of pasta. What we're not so there's very little cash going to Ukraine. Now, I'm sure there is some corruption. Remember, Zelensky was elected as an anti-corruption guy, and he just got rid of his defense minister, I think it is, in the last month or so. And the
Got
issue
rid of
was
all of his defense ministers.
okay,
I think
but the
I
issue
think
was
the entire
corruption.
department was scrapped.
Okay, so if corruption is the issue, then he's doing what he can about it.
Well, people, I don't often support Chuck, but I will in this case. Uh, you can always turn hardware into cash, and I'd like to find out the reasons why Zelensky scrapped his entire defense department, because maybe they were selling stuff that could have been used for the war effort. I don't know, just speculating.
Yeah, the articles I read said there were corruption issues. That's all
Yeah,
it
but what
said.
does that mean? Yeah,
Yeah,
but what does that mean?
I have no idea, but I didn't
It's
know
obviously,
that we haven't sent um, $100 billion worth of cash.
no, we haven't. No,
We've
but as I
sent,
said, you can turn hardware into cash.
yeah, but who are you going to sell it to? And how are you
Uh,
going to sell it without
the
somebody
Wagner
knowing
Group,
about it? Huh?
the Wagner Group.
The Wagner Group is using Russian stuff.
Now, who
And the
knows what they're
reason,
using?
well, they're using Russian stuff because that's what's available. The reason why uh, Putin and Kim got together, North Korea, was because Kim actually has uh, bullets and things that are compatible with what the Russian army's using. If if the Russian army got a hold of a whole bunch of Abrams tanks and F1 rifles, chances are they wouldn't be able to use them, or at least keep them in repaired, because they're so different than what they're used to.
I just want to give you an example of what supports Chuck and Steve.
Okay.
We gave arms to defeat Russia in Afghanistan. We gave them to so-called Taliban. We gave them to Pakistan. And then what happened is they gave part of it to Taliban. They kept part of it to themselves, and part of it they used to send mujahideen across into Kashmir, so that this is what what I had heard, that 1/3 to Taliban, 1/3 to Pakistan army, 1/3 sell to the terrorists who would ravage the Kashmir Valley. And that's what happened. We had to run away. But that is, again, a lot of selling going on there. And so Chuck may have something very nugget there.
So who were the Ukrainians selling the Abrams tanks to?
I don't know.
I'm not saying you're wrong. I'm just asking.
I agree. I can't see them
Who
selling.
knows?
I have a bit of a question. I'm not sure. To what extent is the Ukraine getting support from the European Union? What do they supply? I read the other day that Finland, of all countries, right on the border, right on the Russian border, had sent, I think it was 6 or 8 of their best airplanes to the Ukraine. And I know if you go up and down line, everyone is pretty much involved in sending some sort of aid, but I don't know if it's significant from the European Union or if the United States is carrying the ball. Anyone have a thought on that?
Well, I
I
do
thought it
know
was
they're
coming
giving
from
a
the
lot of
nations.
hardware. Whether
I mean,
it's the same percentage as other countries, I couldn't tell you.
Do you
But
mean the European Union as an organization or the individual countries that
the
comprise
individual
the union?
countries, I think.
yeah,
Well, yes, I mean, it's really Germany is giving a lot. France is.
Right.
The Scandinavian countries are. But I don't think this is European Union policy. I don't think they have policy with regard to this.
yeah.
Actually, I think it'd be more NATO than European Union. And the NATO country, certainly Germany, the Leopard tanks, um, some of the advanced aircraft that Biden was trying to avoid sending. Ultimately, it was being sent through, I think it's Germany. And earlier, somebody mentioned, I think it was Pat, that Poland and Ukraine were having a fight, and Poland wasn't going to give any more aid. And I was just reading an article a day or two ago where that was hyperbole. That stuff is still going to go through Poland to get to Ukraine. And Ukraine is still going to send their wheat through Poland out to the rest of the world. So I would rather that there wasn't a debate going on where there was some question, but evidently it's being dealt with one way or another.
Excuse me, I have to go, gentlemen. It's been a pleasure.
Okay, have a good one, and I apologize for
Great
screwing
to
up
see
the
you, Steve.
time.
Take care, everyone.
Bye.
Okay.
Yep.
Bye.
Um, should the United States continue to,
That's the big question.
to provide not $1 trillion over 2 years? I'm guessing somebody might have better numbers than I do. Less than $100 billion, which is not insignificant money. But if we stopped giving anything, it wouldn't make a hell of a lot of difference to, I don't think, to our economy. We'd put some people out of work, but it's not clear to me that the immediate reaction would be
It's another
positive.
indicator. It's another strong indicator. And yeah, it probably wouldn't mean that much at the moment, but given the debt that we are carrying, I mean, adding a half of 1% or whatever is just making it that much heavier. I mean, it doesn't get better; it can only get worse. So I don't
There's an
see.
easy way to make it better, and that's to put the tax base, the tax percentages back to what they were before Trump.
I agree.
You agree, Pat?
Yeah,
That's a change. No, I'm the conversation is shifting a little bit, but I find it very amusing that when people are worried about the deficit and the future interest payments, et cetera, what they want to do is they want to take money from poor people to reduce government spending. That's very nice. They want many, not all, but many want to cut Social Security. The group that I'm looking at on the screen are all collecting Social Security to a greater or lesser extent, but they never treat the government like a business, which is what they claim they should do. Because if your income does not meet the cost of production, what you do is you increase your income. You raise your prices. In the case of government, raising the prices means raising taxes as opposed to cutting taxes. so that you go deeper and deeper into debt. So,
How far can we go with this debt?
hmm?
How far and what could trigger the debt being finally recognized and trying to work it out? At what point? What do you think would? How would it come about if we were to? If the country was forced, or one of the parties, the leading party, was forced to recognize the debt, and or if they took it upon themselves, what would trigger all that? What could trigger it?
When the
The thing that could
biggest,
trigger, the thing that could trigger uh, a a realization that we can't have any more debt is if the Fed goes out of business. But since the world is run by the banks, that's not going to happen. Uh, Trump, well, all the presidents have done this. They have borrowed money from the Fed. The Fed doesn't have any money. It just simply has a checkbook
Right.
that they can then send money. You know, they can create the money, and then there's a multiplication factor. Once that money gets out, it multiplies by 10.
Hmm.
So that's the discount rate because the money goes into the banks. They can then keep 10% of it and lend out the other 90%, and uh, that's the discount rate. So now, and when that happens, um, when you increase the money supply,
Mhm.
you also increase the price that people pay for things because if you have more money, if everyone has more money, then the good that you're buying is going to go up because everyone has the same need for the goods that are for sale.
So, what if anything ever could trigger a one party or the other, or the government itself, to face the deficit,
It's
to
not the
actually
government
to
that's facing
actually
the
broach
deficit.
it in
It's
some
the
way?
Fed.
Pardon me?
The Fed creates money.
I,
The
Paul,
Fed
I have to
creates money.
disagree with you. The the thing to answer Pat's question and also to, in a sense, answer your issue. The when you and I stop using cash to get what we need, and we start bartering, it means that and this happened in Germany in the early 1930s, where people would work and get off work early and take a wheelbarrow full of cash, physical cash,
Yeah.
down to the grocery store before the prices went up. At that point, A, we'll have to come up with a new way of doing things or a new currency, as the case may be. And B, the Fed is like any other bank. It's a bank of banks. That's all it is. Uh, my local branch of Citizens doesn't have cash in there per se. It's an accounting thing. They keep track of my money, what they say, the amount of money I have. And if I go down there and say I want my money out, as long as I'm by myself, no problem. Here, take whatever you want. But if all of us go down at the same time, they don't have enough cash to deal with that.
So what
And we've
All right.
happens?
seen it in the last year.
The
Do
country
you
becomes
understand that the Fed can write a check having no money? They can write a check for $1 trillion. That's what they did. Uh, that's why the 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 quote national debt went up by $7 trillion um, during Trump. What they did was they lowered the interest rate. They wrote the checks. People borrowed money on the checks, invested in the stock market, and the stock market went up.
He
That
also invested in a number of other things, but you're right, a fair percentage of it went directly into the stock market. But all of this, if you will, is smoke and mirrors. The dollar bill in my pocket
I agree.
has no value intrinsically. It can't be used for anything except maybe uh, to start a fire in my fireplace. It's only when when you Paul are willing to give me something that I want for that dollar bill, and then you use that dollar bill to get something else. The moment that we stop accepting it is when the debt becomes intolerable.
So where do we
Okay.
stand with the debt?
Yeah.
You know, how, I don't quite understand. How does it, quite all of a sudden? I mean, you know, what is the scenario that would bring us back to something resembling normalcy?
Let me throw a little history at you. In the year 2001, Bill Clinton passed on to the next president a surplus for the year's accounts. He said for a variety of different reasons, not all of which had to do with the fact that Bill was a good manager, there was a surplus. What did the president and the Congress, many of the congressional people are still around today, do? They said, oh my God, we have more money than we need right now. Give it back to the people who gave it to us. They didn't reduce the deficit. They increased the deficit. They didn't pay down the national debt. They increased the national debt. We have to, at some point, say there has to, everybody's going to pay a price. You can't just go to one guy. You can't go to Donald Trump and say, give me $1 trillion. A, he doesn't have it. And B, it wouldn't do you any good. You could get $1 billion from him, 2 billion, 3 billion. There's a possibility that's going to happen in the next year. But that amount of money doesn't exist. Over time, we have to make a commitment. And the commitment has to be countrywide. A billionaire can't say, well, I'll tell you what, I'm going to give this politician $100 million, and he's going to help pass a tax cut that's going to save me $1 billion. It's worth it. You have to say, if you're in this country, and oh, by the way, you can't just take your money and run, then you have to help everybody. And there's some people who are incapable of helping. They don't have the cash. They don't have the job, whatever. So other people have to take a bigger load.
There are a number of countries, including Japan,
Mhm.
that owns a certain portion of our debt.
Well,
And at some point, if these countries start calling back their debt, that could endanger us. Also, the dollar is considered the world currency, or has been for many years. That's becoming less and less so. There's a movement between China, India, I think of 3 other
Russia.
countries, Saudi Arabia, Brazil, that's developing their own currency. And that could trigger some issues not too far in the future.
And I think that's very real. But when you talk about who owns the debt of America, the largest single foreign debt holder is China, and China can't call back the debt because that's where their capital is. And if they don't have the capital, then they can't finance their own economy. The other
China
factor,
but China is leading this new currency.
Oh yeah, and by the way, that's again technology. I can do. I could run the world in almost any currency, that including stuff that I made up, cryptocurrency. The debt. The point I wanted to make was the debt. The United States debt is in large measure well over 50%, probably at one point, I think.